Welcome to Pondering Psalms. Today, Curt and I will be looking at, I think it's just a wonderful psalm, Psalm 114. We invite you to stick around and listen in. I love this. I love this psalm. I don't understand it, but I love it. I feel that might have been one of our best episodes. I was looking at me, and then I look at you, and then I looked at me looking at you, and you looking at me looking at you.
Then I just got too creeped out. I had to stop.
Well, welcome back. We're glad that you're spending this time with us. I'm here with my good friend.
Hey, this is Curt Austin and my good friend,
David Mullins. That's who I am. And Curt, today we're taking a look at Psalm 114, and I will say I thoroughly enjoyed this psalm. I don't know about you.
It was interesting. It was so different. It was
different.
So different. It was almost like a children's story.
Oh, yeah. Now, I only read it in the New Living Translation, so I don't know if in other translations it was a little different. Although, the one thing I looked at, they actually do their own translation, and it was a little bit similar, which is, I don't know. I just really liked it. Maybe should we go ahead and jump in?
There.
Okay. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. There's what I wanted to do. All right. So when the Israelites escaped from Egypt, when the family of Jacob left that foreign land, that's where this whole thing begins.
Yep. When they're walking out, they're done. They're leaving after being held captive for 400 years. And they head to Judah, right? I mean, that's kind of the ultimate destination.
They headed to the promised land. I actually wrote in my Bible, I put promised land because when he talks about the land of Judah and Israel becoming his kingdom, it's like, okay, I didn't actually get the connection at first, but it's like, okay, that's the promised land.
So you've got this before and after almost, right? This, you got this before, which is Egypt, and the after, which is the promised land, where that's been promised to them. They're in the process of heading that way.
Yes. And so this is about the Exodus, and it's very evident from there. I mean, the third verse, and I don't know, this is really what got me connected to this. The Red Sea saw them coming and hurried out of their way.
Which isn't anything like the story, right? There's nothing in the story of the Exodus where it hurried away. It's Moses raises his staff and it pushes away. You have this image, this different image, but this makes it like it's.
It's like here. It's almost like a dignitary, when they're coming.
Oh, interesting.
Or a king. Because when the king steps in, everyone steps out of the way to get out of the king's way. I mean, they don't wait for the king to say, hey, move. They just naturally start parting. And we use that phrase, don't we? Parted like the Red Sea.
Yeah. I do. I use it all the time.
Do you? Okay. So the Red Sea saw them coming and hurried out of their way. I just really like that, Curt.
That's really interesting that you're so enamored with this. This is not a passage. This was sweet. It was cute, short. I always like short. And
8 verses.
8 verses. You got to love that. But it was like they were just trying to paint a picture. Like if you were going to sum up the Exodus for your kids, you would say, oh, it was just, it hurried out, it turned away, and the mountains skipped like rams, and the hills like lambs. And I just got that sense that it was just kind of a sweet way to get your kids familiar with the story.
Yeah, now I wasn't as enamored with the mountains skipping like rams and the hills like lambs, because it's like, okay, I don't remember that happening.
Okay, good. That's because I was the same way. But you remember the song from junior high camp, Um,
Jesus is the rock and
no,
Rosemary.
animals, they came on by twosies, or
Yeah.
whatever. What
That's
was that
Rise and
song?
Shine. That's the second
Rise and
time
Shine.
that song's been mentioned on our show.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
A
Well,
few about a month or two ago, talked about going into kids sleeping and singing that song.
oh yeah, that's right. Rise and
Yeah.
Shine. But
Yeah.
that was, that's kind of a fun way to talk about Noah and the flood. The animals came on by twosies, and it's just cute, but it's not fully accurate to the story.
No.
Right.
But
So because there were sevens of the holy animals, pairs of seven of the holy animals, and twos by the unclean animals. And it's kind of like this, the Red Sea parted. Well, yeah, but also a lot of Egyptians lost their lives,
yeah, they did.
when it closed back over them. The water of the Jordan River, and remind me, this is when they actually go into the promised land, right? They're
Yeah, I think
carrying the ark.
yeah, that's important to mention because not everyone realizes that the water parted twice.
Yeah.
One for the Red Sea or the Reed Sea, depending on what you're looking at, and the other for the Jordan when they went across into the promised land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it stopped. It just like stopped flowing downstream.
Yeah.
And so they were able to walk right through it.
Yeah.
As soon as the priests touched the edge of the water, it
I
just
had to dip
pushed
the
back.
toe in the water.
Yeah.
Had to have some faith that,
Yeah.
okay, I'll be okay. I see the
But
water moving.
But you're right. The mountains skipping like rams, the hills like lambs. It's not a part of the story we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Not to say it's not there.
But this is poetry. And, I'm not one that gets poetry all that much.
Poetry in motion, so to speak.
Ooh, yeah. I like that. Poetry in motion.
In
It's
motion,
moving.
skipping like rams, hills like lambs.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's well, you're okay. But I wonder if there's a reference to rams and lambs. If that's a visual that we just don't get. Where I don't know what it could mean. I have no clue.
I think it's saying that everything was getting out of their way. Everything was, making a pathway forward, perhaps. But then I think he really kicks it up a notch.
Yes,
because I love verse 5.
Do you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I read it in my mind like this: "What's wrong, Red Sea?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That made you hurry out of the way? What happened, Jordan River, that you turned away? Why mountains? Did you skip like rams? Why hills like lambs?"
And there's
that
not
actually
an answer.
That does rhyme.
Yeah, but there's no answer to this. There's not a.
There is an answer.
Well, it doesn't tell me. What is
verse 7? The presence of the Lord.
Because God was with the Israelites.
Yeah. The presence of the Lord, that the presence of God of Jacob, that's why they hurried out of the way. That's why they made the space. That's why they parted like the Red Sea. Well, I guess, yeah, it was the Red Sea. Because of the presence of the Lord, because he is so mighty. He was so mighty that he turned. Now think about this. Turning a rock, which is probably the hardest surface that they could think of, into a pool of water, which is, I wouldn't say that's soft. There isn't anything on the other end. Rock is as hard as you get.
I know what you mean.
People look at my biceps and they say, they're hard as a rock.
They look at mine and go, they're soft as water.
There you go.
You're like a little boy. And that is interesting because I thought it was interesting, verse 8, that follows this kind of imagery, this kind of moving, flowing, childlike imagery, and then, but it goes to the fact that this God is overseeing all of nature.
Yeah,
water stops in its course. Mountains tremble, which, to be honest, we've heard that multiple times. And maybe that's what it's in reference to when they're out in the desert and the mountain is shaking, because God's presence is there.
Yeah.
And even turning, and we have read this over and over and over again in the Psalms about the rock and the water.
Yes.
It's so much more important than I ever gave credibility to, as I've read the story.
And I had never thought about it. Oh, he hit a rock and water came out. But when you think about a continuum of, and at verse 8, the second part of verse 8, yes, a spring of water flowed from solid
Yeah.
rock. It was solid. It
And that's
wasn't.
I always thought that maybe like the spring was behind it. Like it was like being held up, and so you hit the rock and that
Oh,
loosened it and it comes out. But the way this tells the story, and which makes sense, is that it actually flowed from the rock, not
yeah,
from the pile of rocks,
yeah.
from the rock.
And think about, I mean, think about what it would take to pulverize a rock in such a way that it was liquefied. I don't even know if it.
Drinkable, because it quenched their thirst as a
Yeah,
nation.
yeah. I mean, in my mind, it's like that's not even possible, and
No,
and that's probably why it had such a big impact.
yeah,
And I wonder, and this might be reading way too much into it, but you've got water with the Red Sea, the Jordan River, and you've
Mhm.
got rock with mountains and hills.
Interesting.
And so I don't know if really what the psalmist was getting to was this rock into a pool of water, a spring of water flowing from the rock. Why? Because the presence of God.
And you think of people living in that area. I mean, it's either desert with lots of rocks, or mountains, or seas that are there. But so they're surrounded by rocks and water, and those are the elements that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. You have to have water, and you live in this mountainous region, and yet God is in charge of every bit of that.
Yeah.
Everything responds to God's presence. Period.
And the question that I think this passage is asking me is, how do I respond to the presence of the Lord?
Yeah.
How do I respond to the presence of the God of Jacob? Uh, you had said that the water flowing from the rock is more significant that you had ever kind of knew,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but maybe the presence of the Lord is more significant than what I ever knew.
Hmm.
And maybe this is really trying to get me to reevaluate, my relationship with this God that turns solid rock into water, that parts the sea. The sea does what he wants. The hills and the mountains
Yeah.
do what he wants, and the rock turns into flowing water. But what about me? Uh, I could continue to throw out things such as a heart of stone.
Ooh.
Can God change my heart of stone to make it uh, formable? Because water always takes the form that it's put in. Doesn't matter what it is. Am I willing to be put in the form that God is wanting me to be put in? That's all I got.
That's brilliant. That's I
I,
mean that's
I don't know
I
about
didn't get
that.
any of that from this passage.
I just got it since we've been chatting.
That's and that it reflects back on the conversation is really important.
Yes.
Formation in common as we're learning.
And one of the things at our church, we're going through this discipleship process. And one of the things that I keep bringing up is get with someone,
Yeah.
get with a friend, journey
Yeah.
together. It doesn't matter if you're, feel like you're at the same place or not, but someone that also has the same goal of deepening the relationship with God, get with them and do something together and then talk about it.
Yeah.
It'll and then record it and put it on YouTube and Facebook.
I'm not I'm not going to talk about that. There's a lot of things you could say we do that no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that, and as we've been, I think you and I both agree, as we've been talking about the Psalms over the last how many weeks? What is this? 114,
I
60
I
weeks.
know. It's
50 some
incredible.
weeks that we've been talking about this. We're coming up on a year
I know. Or
of
or have we
it was
passed a year?
Well, we started with 40, right?
No, we started with 69.
69, and we're only we're 114. So, 55.
So 119 will be a year, I think.
Eee.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So, but as we've done that, just like the insight that you have gained from this while we've been talking,
Yeah.
is
Very
not
helpful.
insight I had thought about, and now I can think about that, and every time I read this passage in the future, let alone during the week as I'm thinking about what it meant, it'll come out. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
my heart can be a heart of stone, and God just wants it to melt.
Yeah.
And
one of the things that I think is helpful is whenever you're reading scripture to basically step back and say, what question is this passage asking of me? God has a purpose, and you can look at, you can go through Bible study and do interpretations and stuff. But at some point, God wants to speak his word into us, and he's always trying to, I think, communicate. And so it's good to kind of step back and say, okay, Lord, what are you asking me from this passage?
And this is the thing I didn't do this week, because I read it and it seemed like a children's story, and I just put it aside.
The giving tree is a children's story, but man,
Well,
it
so
can
it's
still make you cry.
Barrington Bunny, and I mean, there's
And
lots of children's stories.
I'll love you forever.
The
Do you know that
Velveteen,
one?
the Velveteen Rabbit.
Yeah.
All of those are beautiful children's stories, and and that, I think that's the thing. Sometimes we read it, we go, and we move on, and rather than stopping and saying, okay, what really is this saying? Well, thank you for taking us there.
Well, I was really captured. I was captured by just because I don't see that level or that kind of poetry in a lot of the other Psalms that we've looked at so far.
No, you're right. It's a very unique in the way it tells its story.
Yeah, and I love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to close it down. Thank you for leading us in. Thank you for leading us through it, and for giving us great insight. And so for everybody who's joined us, we'll be back in next week. We keep posting these and hope that it's feeding your soul as much as it's feeding ours. And if it's not, oh well, it's still feeding ours. So we'll run with that. All right. Well, have a great day, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Blessings. So
perfect is always the enemy of or no.
They say perfect's the enemy of the good.
Of the good, yeah.
But I say perfect's the enemy of anything. Because if you're looking for something that's perfect, if you're looking for the perfect product, you never buy anything.
Right.
If you're looking for the perfect laptop, you're always going to wait. Well, you know what? If I get this now, in 3 months I have something that's going to be much better.
Yep.
And so you're constantly in that mode of never, ever doing anything because nothing is perfect.
Do you watch any stand-up comedy stuff?
No.
Brian Regan. Are you familiar with Brian Regan?
The name's familiar.
Okay. He has a new stand-up comedy, and he was talking about the fact that the original Voyager that they sent out, in the 70s, that's like just going out into space, within another 100 years, the technology will have improved so much that they'll be able to send out another probe that will catch up and pass the Voyager. And he said, so basically, we just wasted a bunch of time. Why didn't we just wait?
Yeah, really.
And it's exactly that mindset of, there's always going to be something better. And in fact, it's going to surpass.
And here's the reality. And I know it's a comedic thing, but if you didn't send out the Voyager, you would have never sent out the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't know that you could improve on that.
Yeah, I keep telling her, I said, you move and then you adapt.